Hello, man. Dr. Sam here. Again, I'm just sitting in my backyard, taking advantage of the privilege that I have to speak to you, as all of us, or at least the most of us, are under quarantine as a result of this virus that's going around, and under the leadership of our state. Some of you are asking, what are all these books in front of you, Dr. Sam? Well, they're the journals I've been telling you about. This is about half of them that I have upstairs. If you were to read these journals, which you never will, you would read about my life, my ups, my downs, the thoughts I've had about individuals. When I wanted to quit, throw in the towel. There are times in here when I really did want to quit life, but God brought me through. This is one of the first ones my dad gave me. He gave me this when I first was locked up in the county jail. I didn't read this for years. It's a daily devotional, but I started taking notes in the bottom of how my day went after I met the Lord. This one right here is one from 2002. This is 1971. And in it, I've written on the outside things like, in this journal, you'll find one of my first trips to Ghana, where we started putting wells in villages. We've put quite a few in since then with the helps of people like you in churches that are pastored by friends of mine and businesses. There's another one in here, writing where I wrote about Pastor Napoleon Kaufman, when he gave me a word one day. We were having lunch, but he shared something with me from God. I highly respect Pastor Kaufman. I highly respect him. In fact, I respect him more than he'll ever know, and I love him as well. But one of the things that happened as I was looking in these journals the other day, normally when I go through them, I'm looking for something, and Linda and I had a conversation about something. I said, well, let me see if I can find what we're looking for. And as I'm looking through these journals, a letter fell out. It was a letter from my father. We were having a celebration at the church Linda and I pastored. He was supposed to be there. He couldn't be there. My stepmother was sick. So he wrote me a letter. He's been gone now almost 10 years, but I still have this letter. Here's the first words in this letter. I would love to be with you today, but I have many beautiful memories. My friends, please, if you hear nothing I ever tell you, leave something in writing for those that you love so they can feel and hear your thoughts. I have some of these like this. I've written just nothing but love letters to Linda, and when they get full, I just give them to her. I want her to know that she wasn't just married to a man that appreciated washing his clothes and cooking and working hard when I was going to school. I want her to know when I'm dead and gone, should God call me away before her, she has some things she can read about what was going on in my heart. Another thing that happened as I was reading this journal took me back to when I first met Jesus. And one day I was walking to the dining facility in this institution that I was in, and the Spirit of the Lord, which I came to know as the Spirit of the Lord, I didn't know it at the time, but something said, I want you to thank me for being in this institution. And I remember, I can almost take you to the spot where I stopped and I said, God, I love you. I'll probably do about anything you want me to do, but I refuse to say thank you for letting me be locked up. I ain't never gonna say that. Never say never. So I went on to the dining hall. Next morning, same thing. Next morning, same thing. It went on for a few days, few weeks. I don't remember now. But one day I looked up to heaven and I said these words, God, thank you for letting me be locked up. You happy now? Next day, the same thing. The next day, the same thing. And pretty soon, I came to the realization of this. It went beyond my lips. See, it was just words. It was just words to appease God. But it went from words on my lips, went to my heart. It made me think about what I was saying. To my head rather. And then from my head, it went to my heart. And from my heart, it became a way of life. And I knew it was a part of my lifestyle when a guy came up to me one day and he asked me these words. Hey, Sam, you like being locked up? I said, no, why? He said, man, you always walk around smiling. You speak to everybody. You even speak to the white boys, man. You call them brother. Man, now you know that's a no-no. But because everybody knows who you are and what have you, and you know how you're a consistent Christian in this institution, nobody will say anything to you. Why do you do that? Gave me an incredible opportunity to tell him about Jesus. But then I started thinking, where did the genesis of this come from? The thought of thanking God. And I remembered just a few weeks prior, Pastor G. Lee Thomas, who was the pastor of the Assemblies of God Church in Sonora, He used to come to the prison and do Bible studies. He became my spiritual father, whom I loved until the time God called him home. He could do more with one word. I would go up to him and say, Pastor Geely, how did you get all that out of one word? And he would just smile, and he studied. Later I realized he was studying and he knew God. He was walking with God. But one night he came. And the scripture that he used that night in our Bible study, where Paul commands us to rejoice always, pray continually, and give thanks in all circumstances. And I started thinking about that. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances. You see, Paul is challenging us to rejoice, which is to make joyful in the reality of your day. Whatever you're going through, how do you rejoice in that situation? How is it that I had joy even when my father passed away? Here's how. Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, is the center of my joy. He's the center. And unless he changes, I can be consistently joyful no matter what my circumstances are. And Paul says, rejoice, make joyful, be joyful in whatever situation you're in. And brothers, remember this now. He's on quarantine. I mean, real quarantine. He's in that prison in Rome, and he's writing these words to us. Even today, as we are in some sorts, we are in quarantine as well. But Paul is telling us thousands of years later, told me this a few years back, but he's telling me again today and you again today, rejoice. He also tells us to pray. Prayer is just communion with God. Well, how do we do that? Pray, continually. How do I just continue to pray? How do I continue to have communion with God? The same way sometimes when I'm out shopping and I'll think about Linda. She's not there. Or I'm eating lunch and I'll say, you know what, let me buy something to take home to Linda or my grandchildren. It's being in a communion with God. It's a heart thing. It's a heart thing, my brothers, whereby you and God are in deep communion all day long. And when you're making decisions, sometimes you stop and you're in such communion, after a while, you kind of know what he would have you to do. But it's because of prayer. The last thing Paul tells us too, he says, give thanks. In other words, to express gratitude and appreciation. That was hard for me to do. In fact, digressing a moment, I had a guy come up to me one time, because at this time in my incarceration, we were in a dormitory. The guy comes up to me and he says, you pray in tongues, don't you? I said, why do you ask? He says, you pray in tongues, don't you? I said, why do you ask? You see, I wasn't raised Pentecostal, so I was still a little skittish about who I wanted to know that I prayed in tongues. And finally I said, yes, I do. Why do you ask? He says, because when you're asleep at night, you pray in tongues in your sleep. I looked at him, smiled, I kind of laughed. But let me tell you what I realized. The hell that I was in, the darkness that I was living in, and all the craziness, the screams, the yell, the stuff. It was so vexing, getting to me, that at nighttime God would bring me visitations from his spirit and would relieve me of all the junk that was going on inside of me. And when I would wake up the next morning, I got to start a new day, but I was filled with joy, I was filled with peace, because I was filled in a new way with the presence of Jesus. Now, men, I want you to listen to Dr. Sam. That same God who visited me in that institution, that's the same God who said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. He's the same God that's with you right now, Dad. He knows you're struggling. He knows you don't know when you're going to be able to go back to work. He knows you don't know when you're going to pay the bills, and he knows that you're ready to explode. I'm telling you. He knows. I'm telling you. When I look back, this helps me. When I look back, I see he was with me, and I'm telling you right now, he's with you. You can't see it sometimes, man. But I'm telling you, he's with you. That's why I'm always encouraging. Right now, it's a great opportunity for you to begin a relationship with another person on the phone, Zoom, with another brother. There's somebody waiting on you to call them just to encourage their hearts. And in the process, I guarantee you'll be encouraged. I told you before, I have a couple of brothers in Springfield, and we talk, we laugh, we're on the phone, and more so even now than before. I have a brother, a friend live in Stockton, a couple live in Vallejo. And I talk with these guys, sometimes late at night, sometimes early in the morning, and we laugh. Sometimes we cry. I have a prayer team that comes to my home. They used to at least once a quarter. This past Friday, we had a fellowship and we prayed on the phone. We cried some because one of the people's spouses had died. You need relationship. This is a storm. You cannot, man and wife, single, doesn't matter. Teenager, can make this alone. Great time to develop some deep, lasting relationships. You see, Paul is calling us to obedience. Obey in rejoicing, obey in praying, obey in giving thanks. You see, nothing worthwhile is easy. Nothing worthwhile is easy, but the obedience and the reward of obedience to these commands are rich and ever so full. So I'm praying for you. I want you to know I love you. I care about you. And when we get back together again, whether it be in Eureka, wherever it might be, the one we're going to have in Hollister in September, Lord willing, wherever it might be, we're going to blow the roof off the house with some serious worship. But until then, I want you to know you're not alone. Now, this next piece, some of you have been to Man Up last few years. You know there's a young man that has a disease and he needs a miracle, but he comes on stage. His name is Demetrius, and he plays a song for us. He's going to play one for you right now. Think about him, and may God bless you.
That's Master D on the saxophone. Got something to say?
Thank you for letting me do this, and it's a really good honor to do it for you.
All right, thanks, Dr. Sam. Love you guys.